It's a blessing to welcome on former three-star recruit and Denver Star, and now the newest member of Iowa State's new look young core, Robert Jones. How you doing, man?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good. Kind of walk us through this a little bit. Obviously, you went in the transfer portal. You're originally from Denver, and now you obviously make this whole decision to go to Iowa State. This whole new era, really, of Iowa State basketball. Take us through how you're feeling right now.
Pretty stoked to be honest. I'm excited to get part of something new. The coaches seem pretty fired up, and I'm excited to get on campus and start some.
I know Iowa State fans are excited because this is a proud basketball area. They love the game of basketball, and it's been a little rough year, especially last year for themselves. We're gonna come in here now, and obviously, it's gonna be a lot of new pieces that come in. But how do you guys rebuild those? Like, how are you guys gonna be able to get this back up to where Iowa State has basketball in the past?
Just by creating a culture of winning. Like we have to be able to have one established goal, and we all have to fight with each other to achieve that one goal.
Without we're gonna go back a little bit because I want Iowa State fans to get to know you a little bit better because you obviously have a story that leads you to this point. So you're from Minnesota. Take us through like what was it like growing up out there?
Uh, it was different because I would say I spent the first 10 years of my life in Florida. So growing up in Minnesota is completely different, just in terms of like how you treat adults and like what you call things and the accent, of course. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but overall, it was nice. Like I was part of, I played for D1 Minnesota. I was fortunate to be part of a team where all of us went and played Division I basketball after we were done with our high school careers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from there, I accepted a scholarship to the University of Denver out of high school, um, and was there the last 2 years. Ended up starting as a freshman and averaged about 32 minutes a game, ending my freshman season. And my last game, my freshman season, I had a 23 and 8 performance in the quarterfinal game against the best team in our conference that year.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Let's see, last year, which would be my sophomore year, this year, I suffered an injury before Christmas, the game right before Christmas, and was out for the first part of our conference play. Um, so my numbers are a little weird just because of recovering from that and having to jump back into a team that was established but not really rolling.
Mm-hmm. And we could go back to Minnesota. It's obviously not a place that is known for producing a ton of talent day in, day out, but right now it's really on the rise. There's constantly guys coming out of there right now at this point in time. Clearly, you guys have the number one player in the country in Chet. Kendall Brown's from there originally. But there's just a lot of talent. You were even with some special guys we'll talk about in a second, too, on your own high school team. You kind of be in that atmosphere, and you've been a part of this new rise in Minnesota basketball, really a new era out there. What's it been like kind of growing up and starting to see a lot more attention and slowly start coming into Minnesota?
It's great because when I was growing up, I mean, there's not enough attention put on Minnesota Hoopers. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we had in just our class alone, like we had like five different nationally ranked top 100 players on ESPN, and I mean that's pretty impressive, especially when like one of the dudes is number nine and number two, depending on where you look. And obviously, we know Jalen Suggs is from Minnesota, and Gary Trent, who's putting out great numbers out there with Portland. And it's just a ton of inspiration knowing that I grew up around those people and played against these different players throughout my high school career, and uh, just seeing like, oh, like these are the guys like I grew up with, and the girls. Paige Becker's doing it out there for UConn. That is inspiring to see other people from Minnesota really doing well in the hooping world.
You're growing up with these guys. We're talking about Dawson a little bit. You guys obviously got to be teammates for 3 years out there, but you just, like you said, playing with these guys on D1 Minnesota, an elite basketball program from Minnesota. A lot of different guys that you just watched also. Like you said, the girls and guys on the stage. But who specifically, when you look back at your AAU years or high school years of guys in Minnesota, like who are the guys you really enjoyed going up against?
That's a good question. To be honest, I'd always have to say Tyler Wall just because we were in the same conference. So we played each other twice every year. And he always just brought a great competitive spirit every game, and it was just fun to play against just because you knew you could get your best out of him every night. Um, I would also say, shoot, one of the One of the people I'd say I had the hardest time with would be um, the big man Oscar from West Virginia.
Hmm.
We played them with you in Minnesota, and uh, he might have been one of the biggest, most athletic kids I've ever played against. And it was just kind of crazy. But yeah.
We also know the phenom of Chet now. He's emerged and become the number one player in the country. But for a lot of people that don't know his story, obviously he wasn't always this prodigy guy. It wasn't like he was a superstar in middle school and early on in high school. It really just came into the scene, especially more so last year. Like you kind of were in the same state of him. So did you see the potential in him? Did you think he could reach the status he's now reached, or kind of what were your thoughts on Chet growing up?
Of course. I mean, one of my good friends here in Denver that I met here on the team playing for Denver actually is a lot closer to Chet. So the things he says about him and the things that he shows me and I watch about him just shows me like, and he can really like do all the things that a big man should like aspires to do in their off time. And it's kind of encouraging because he's getting the recognition for doing those things. And I mean, he's a 7-footer that can shoot. Like, that's insane.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, now you go through your recruiting process, your high school years, and you weren't necessarily a super high ranked guy. I know 247 ended up having you on their own rankings in the top 250, I believe, a 3-star, but still, obviously, you panned out to be a great player. Now you are a high major player at Iowa State. But what were your thoughts? Like, how did you handle not necessarily being regarded as one of the top players in the country, even though you still were putting up big time numbers?
Um, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before, but it's definitely something I thought like of myself. Just like looking at the rankings, I'd say like my senior year, going into my senior year, like I was ranked top 200 by 247, like you said, and it's just like all the people around me were like had commitments to Texas Tech and Arizona, stuff like that, and it's just like, well, if they're doing all this and I'm going to the University of Denver, like it's tough, like not being recruited to where you need to be, but I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I finally at a place where my numbers reflect.
Let's get into your own personal high school career a little bit. Your freshman year, you kind of get established a little bit, but walk us through that. You go to your own high school. What was that first year like at Prior Lake, and why exactly did you choose Prior Lake to be your school?
We chose my parents chose Prior Lake after we moved in around my 8th grade year.
Mhm.
They chose Prior Lake just because of the prestigiousness of the school and the location in comparison to my dad's work. Um, I would say my freshman year, I was on the freshman team just because we got a brand new coach that year and he didn't want to make any sudden transitions. Um, then my sophomore year, I was on JV and varsity, but I ended up playing two halves varsity every game by the end of my sophomore year. Junior year, I started and was a captain. Um, Averaged, I'd say like I think it was 15 and 11 my
Mhm.
junior year, and then my senior year, I averaged about 19 and 13. It was also a starter captain.
Walk us through that first part a little bit because you mentioned you weren't always a full-time varsity guy from the very beginning. Once again, you're out of high major in Iowa State. Either way, you're still a Division One player coming out. A lot of people think if you're a Division One guy, you're starting from day one as a freshman. You're going to be dominating throughout your high school career. A lot of guys do have that story though, where you take a little bit more time to develop and you ultimately come into your role junior, senior year. Some guys even post grad year or something like that. What was it like kind of not being a full-time starter your first freshman year?
Um, I mean, it was definitely weird because like I felt like I had the talents to beat out the people who were playing,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like there was a lot of politics that went into it and stuff like that. So it's just like if you keep grinding on your work and you get your work done, like that stuff's gonna show up, and you can eventually get to places you want to be. One of my favorite stories of this is one of my point guards from high school. He was on the C team all the way up until 8th grade. Made like the B team. Had the same kind of story as me, where it was like didn't start as a freshman, um, didn't really play as a sophomore, and then ended up working into a starting position junior and senior year. And now he's playing Division II basketball after being on one of the worst teams that our school has to offer. So I mean, it's just all about like being in the gym and continuing to pursue your grind.
At that point in time, if I would have went back and I asked you, would you have seen yourself becoming a guy that was going to play Division One anywhere, and let alone now at a school like Iowa State? Could you have seen that in your future as a freshman?
As a freshman, absolutely. I was told by a lot of my coaches at the time, like, hey, like you have Division I talent. you got to play for a Division I AAU program. And that's kind of the reason why I decided to play for D1 Minnesota, just because I knew they had the success of sending tons of players Division I.
And we know a lot of guys, especially in this era, guys like to transfer out, go to prep school, go out of state even, especially when you probably aren't being covered as best as you probably could have been in Minnesota at that point in time. But you stayed at probably like your entire high school career. What went into that? Like, why do you want to stay loyal instead of looking at other options like a post grad or like playing at prep school somewhere?
That's an easy answer. I love my teammates. I was fortunate to play with two other Division I players and two Division II athletes as my starting lineup. Just to name them, Dawson Garcia, who plays over at Marquette, all freshman first team in the Big East, and Tyree and Nacho over at North Dakota, who won Freshman of the Year in the Summit League in my league. So, I was fortunate to play with those two players, and it's like, why would I go anywhere else if I'm in the starting lineup with guys as talented as them?
That's the guy I really want to touch up on. That's Dawson Garcia because he's a year younger than you. Came in your sophomore year. It was his freshman year, and we know what he's become now. He became a McDonald's All-American, top 30 ranked player, all freshman team. In my opinion, probably a top 15, top 10 kind of caliber freshman entire country this past year. How special was he though when he walked in just as a freshman, a 15, 16-year-old guy? How special was he, and did you see him become this good at that point in time?
Oh man, I knew it from day one. I knew he was going to be special, and to be honest, like that's really family. Like I would definitely consider one of my brothers just because I grew up with him and we did everything together in terms of basketball. So just seeing his development and watching the work that he puts in, I knew he was going to be special.
You guys start building that bond because you end up getting 3 years together. How much do you see a relationship grow? Like you end up becoming a dynamic duo by the time you're a senior, he's a junior, and even earlier than that. But especially that year was special too. But how do you guys kind of see your bond grow over the course of that 3 years together?
We just saw each other as great players, and we knew that we both were going to be successful in life, especially coming out of high school. And so we just created a bond over that.
So when you guys kind of first got teamed up, did you kind of know him prior to that? Did you guys have a relationship, or did it all kind of start when you first came to school?
Um, I did not know him until I met him at school. No.
And now you go watch him, you just turn on the TV, you see what he's doing this past year in college. What was that kind of just watching him now grow into what he's become?
It's epic. Like I'm sure he enjoyed the same process when I left high school and was playing and starting um, for my team. And so the feeling that I had for him was just like, dang, like Big East, like he's starting the Big East team as a freshman, like he's putting up all conference numbers, all this stuff, and it's just like it's impressive. I really hoop with him. Like that's really my boy for real.
I'm not sure if games will ever align. You never know between NCAA tournament, different showcase tournaments, and the preseason before non-conference play. But if you and Dawson ever do game up against each other and play Marquette, now versus Iowa State, how would that game go, and what would that game be like?
It'd be interesting. I'm all for being friends off the court. It's nice. I probably won't say anything to him in person until after the game, though. I mean, it's business from there, from tip. Not even from tip. It's business from the time you step on the court after you lace the shoes up. So it's my teammates versus his. That sort of thing.
That's the mentality that really just athletes have to really master and learn how to kind of understand that because clearly in real life, you're not just going to go be friends and not be friends at times, but there's a strict reason for basketball. You have to compete. Like you said, it's a business. How have you learned that and when do you really start developing that mentality?
As soon as you start making friends with players on the other team, I played against Tyler Wall. Like he was one of my U teammates, and I played against him twice every year. So it's like I gotta make sure I stay locked in until after the game, and then after the game, in the handshake line, I can say what's up. Just this year, I played against Tyree at North Dakota. I happened to come back from my injury, and that was my first game back, and I was super grateful that I got to play against him. But I respect him on the court, but as soon as I have to go block his shot, make a good read, all that sort of stuff, like those sort of feelings is like he's just a player wearing a different uniform.
Mm-hmm. And so you look at your high school career as a whole, and you kind of get better each year. You end up going 22-6 your junior year, 23-4 your senior year. Walk us through those final 2 years, but your upperclassmen years, you really start coming into form of who you are, become the guy that people start recognizing across the country to a degree. What are those years like?
Um, it was great. Like we would, but we just needed to have more. I don't know. We needed to go farther in state. We needed to win our section. We needed to get out of section, get to state. And I just feel like we fell short.
And we go back to Minnesota real quick. When you look back at all the guys currently in college from the state of Minnesota, who'd be like your starting five? You can make a starting five, the best guys from Minnesota right now. Who's your college starting five from Minnesota?
College starting five for Minnesota. Okay. We got to go Suggs with the point guard. I'm gonna say, hmm. Uh, it's hard. There's so many good hoopers, and especially in the college game, that it's hard to put one person in one spot. And I honestly don't know enough of them. Like I would say, like Parker Fox would be up there, Jamison Battle, Matthew Hurt, David Roddy, uh, myself, Tyler Wall. Um, I mean, these are just the people that I know personally. Like, there's definitely more out there, and I don't even want to pick the starting five.
We look at all the states now. I mean, that's something special. I know also you could throw in McKinley Wright technically for now until he goes to the
Mhm.
NBA. But if you look at all of these guys, obviously we know how good Jalen is. McKinley would probably be the best possible dynamic duo you could possibly form in college basketball right now at the guard positions. But when you take your state versus all the other states in the country, where would Minnesota rank up?
Ah, I'd say top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got it's hard because I mean you got big states like Texas, California, and New York who just have tons of people. You also have good basketball states like Georgia where they have Atlanta with tons of people, and Atlanta's got some of the best basketball in the country. But then you also got like states like Alaska where it's like, I mean, they're gonna be like big and solid, but like there's just not enough people to create like a better team than Minnesota. So I'd say top 10 for sure, especially now with all the talent that has been put out.
Couldn't agree more. Let's go into this recruiting process because you're going through it. You start pulling offers. You have Xavier in the mix for you, Penn State, North Dakota, a few other schools, but you also come down to Denver being the school you choose. How did Coach Billups win you over?
Um, Honestly, it was the coaches in the city. Like I really loved the campus. Denver and Colorado is just a beautiful place. There's a prestigiousness behind the academics at the University of Denver, and then just the coaching staff that they had at the time. They just recruited me really hard, and it felt like a good place for me.
Remembering back a little bit, do you remember who would have been your second option or was the number two option for you?
Um, see, that was interesting because I would say my first option was Xavier. I was going to go to Xavier, but they had, um, I would say that the head coach there at the time let a few too many people in my position commit after I'd already told them I wanted to commit. And I just felt spited after that and didn't really want to deal with the recruiting process. So I went with my number two option, which was the University of Denver.
Gotcha. And so you go out there, and obviously we know Coach Billups is gone now, but you've built a relationship with him. That recruiting process, 2 years being coached by him. What was Coach Billups like?
Coach Billups is a man of great character. I'll say that first and foremost. I loved playing under him. I regret that he was fired, but at the same time, we did have losing seasons. Um, and although I never wish it on somebody, um, I definitely wanted to find another place for myself just so I could make sure that I got the resources that I needed and put my talents to a level where I feel like they can be utilized and play against better talent every game. So it was he was definitely the person that got me to Denver. He is the reason why I would have stayed in Denver as well.
And this is something that's challenging for guys because we know when you're out of a team that goes 7-24 one year, 2-19 the next year, it's got to be tough on a team. Obviously, your goal is to win games, win championship, that kind of stuff. Losing is not obviously the main goal you head into each game with. So, how did you deal with that? Like, how was the locker room handling two back-to-back losing seasons? Like, what does the character and the kind of energy of a locker room do throughout the course of the seasons?
And see, that's the crazy part. Our locker room was actually great. Like we had great connection with like our teammates, with our coaches. Like we had a good familial bond. Our practices were very upbeat. Everybody was getting after it. There's a lot of energy. Like there was winning habits on the court in practice, we had winning habits off the court. We only had one COVID incident throughout our entire season, and we had a team GPA of above 3.2. I think it was probably up at a 3.6, 3.8. And we were just winning in all aspects besides the games that we played. And we just didn't know, we couldn't put our finger on how to fix it. And yeah.
That's something that obviously we know that the media obviously goes at people and just might blame it on point finger and stuff because they aren't in the day-to-day thing. But like you just said, going back to Coach Billups thing, obviously you have a high academics team. To have you guys still remain positive throughout losing seasons, handling COVID to really one of the better things in the country when having one shutdown. Like, how was that? Like, just establishing that, and how were you guys able to still stay so cool with each other in a way throughout the course of those years?
It's just an attest to his character. That's just who he is as a person. He's a very calm and level-headed guy. Like he has really learned to think before acting, and he inspires his players to become great men and men of great character. And that is the reason why I love playing underneath him as a coach.
No doubt. And when you look at that roster, going back to that too, I mean, you had a lot of talent yourself. Obviously, he's one of the better centers. Obviously, you missed a lot of games, so that could have been part of the reason for this year too. But you have Jace out there, who's now a great player, had a whole big mark for himself in transfer portal, and a lot of the talent. Like, what do you think if you could look back at, like, what could you have possibly changed to have produced more wins, or like what do you think possibly could have been one of the possible downsides or weaknesses to the team?
I think the downside of this season had to be the COVID withdrawals at the university itself. We had a lot of restrictions put on our team and our coaches, just in terms of like how often we can get in the gym. We never had locker room access throughout the entire year, and I just feel like the resources that we were given was not enough to create a winning team. Like we needed to put in some time afterwards just to get a little bit of shooting up, because all those extra shots, all that extra practice really like makes sure you can make that game winning shot, that extra three in the game type thing, so we can win the game by one instead of lose it by two.
So you guys weren't able to go in after practice or after a game and shoot anymore?
Correct.
And you guys weren't able to go to the locker room throughout the year?
With the COVID restrictions, in order to keep everybody socially distanced, none of our teams had access to the locker room or 24-hour like access to the gym.
That's crazy. And you look at that because you have your freshman season, which is pretty much normal. We know obviously no COVID, and this comes into factor. And as you said, some states and teams were handling it better, differently than others. But overall, how did you adjust to that as a player when you're looking at a whole different scene now? You're getting a daily COVID test you have to wake up for. You're going through all these restrictions that you guys had. It sounds like even more than most schools had. How did you handle that as a player?
Um, Honestly, it had to be done, so I just buckled up, and that's just what it was. But it's a big reason why I wanted to find a new home.
Yeah. So going to a couple of games you had throughout your career, one of which was, you said, obviously a big game you had. You came on March 7th last year against North Dakota State, which was your season high at that point in time, your career high. What was that night like?
Uh, it was it was an emotional roller coaster. I mean, we feel like we should have won. Everybody in the building felt like we should have won. Even different players and different coaches from North Dakota State felt like we should have won the game. It's painful to say that we lost, especially after a great game from me, a great game from Jace, and a great game from our senior Ade. And I mean, it was nice that I was playing well. We were making all the right reads and all these good decisions, and so our emotional level on the court was great. It was almost to the point that you didn't even feel tired. I mean, there was great energy in the building, and it's just and we ended up losing. So the energy afterwards and just the feelings afterwards, just were drained from that moment on. You just kind of feel that defeat for sure.
Your freshman year was overall pretty successful in terms of your own statistical category. I mean, 9 points, 5 rebounds, assists, a steal per game is pretty solid. Then we have the whole COVID shutdown happens and we never was pretty much stuck at home, finding a gym to work out in. What was your mindset heading into that? When you talked about, okay, I'm coming from my freshman year, what were the things you really wanted to key in on and work on during the whole COVID lockdown?
Um, I definitely wanted to work on like establishing my leadership role on the team. I was named a captain going into my sophomore year for the team, and because of that, I wanted to establish that sort of role. I wanted great connection with all of my teammates, and I really wanted to inspire hard work on and off the court.
Your sophomore year comes up and you're playing pretty solid, and then you have the injury that shuts you down for nearly a month or so. What was that like? And just take us through the whole process going through it with COVID going on and having to rehab through the whole injury.
Of course, yeah. So it was crazy. This is the dumbest injury I've ever seen in my entire life. What happened was I went up for a jump ball and ended up hyperextending my leg against the person I was jumping with, like leg. So my knee just kind of just buckles like this. So they look at all my ligaments during the game. They cleared me to go back in, like I get all my movement back, and then after halftime, it kind of just stiffs up and locks on me, and I can't go the rest of the game. So I get my MRI, no, I get my X-ray that day before I go home for Christmas, and there was no problems with the X-ray. Everything came back negative. There was no breaks, no tears, blah blah blah. I go home, and I'm running a 3 mile run on the 24th, and I go back to Denver on the 25th and practice a full practice on the 26th. No problems. We're set to leave to go play GCU on the 27th, and we're literally at the airport in the bus, and they tell us that they had a COVID incident, so we have to turn around at the airport, come back, and we have a practice. No, I knew that we didn't play until that next Friday, and it's Monday at this point. So I'm like, okay, let me talk to my trainer. My knee's hurting a little bit. There's a little bit of swelling. Like, let's see if everything's okay. He looks at it. He said there was too much swelling for it to have been okay, and so I get an MRI. The MRI comes back, and they said that I fractured my tibia, which is like the bone in my shin. And they said that what happened was when I hyperextended my knee, the bone that is where my quad is went through my meniscus and cracked into my shin bone, my tibia, and fractured it. So from that moment, from that MRI on, I had 6 weeks, but I was able to fight back and really grind through my rehab and get back 2 weeks early, just in time for the technically for the South Dakota State game, but that was our first COVID incident of the year. So I did not get to showcase until the North Dakota game.
Absolutely. So then the year comes to a close, and as we know, you put your name in that transfer portal. We know you end up at Iowa State. That's the original decision. You already said why you want to go into it, but who were the schools in the mix? Like, was there a number two option? Who else was heavily recruiting you when you put your name in the portal?
Um, it was strange because I was recruited by Kyle Green to go to UNI early, and I even heard from him my junior year as well to go to UNI. And what I would say is he took the job at Iowa State, and I was kind of like, oh, like that was an interesting change of events. Like I texted my mom, I was like, UNI just became Iowa State, like just like to keep track of who all I was getting recruited by. And we jumped on the Zoom call, and the Zoom call was perfect, and I heard everything I needed to hear in terms of what I wanted to do next in my journey. And Coach TJ called me later that night, and he extended an offer, and I told him that I would accept it on the spot, and we just went from there.
This, like I said, we talked a little bit in the beginning, but this is Iowa State, and they've had many great runs. The proud basketball community, obviously, basketball I think is one of the main sports that obviously prioritized there. They have a great history too, but like I said, they've had a past coaching staff obviously wasn't the best in terms of getting them wins. What's Coach TJ going to bring to you guys? We know he's a great young coach. Formerly was with Iowa State before. How's it going to take, and what's it going to be like, kind of revamping this entire program, possibly bringing them back to becoming a Big 12 contender?
Uh, I would say the first thing I noticed about Coach TJ is that he's sincere. Like if he's gonna tell you something, he's gonna do something. Which is really good to hear out of a coach because you never want your coach to say one thing and then give you half of it. I feel like TJ is the type of person that inspires that sort of leadership and encourages, and that sort of leadership encourages winning, and that's what I feel like he's going to bring back to the culture. I mean, he did it. He's done it at the last two places that he's been a head coach at South Dakota State and at UNLV. They both were pretty successful cultures when he was there, and I'm excited that he took the job here because I feel like he has that. He's been a part of the successful Iowa State teams of the past, and I feel like whenever a coach comes back, they always bring the good mojo and that same sort of winning success that they had back to the program.
In your discussions with him, what were some of the things he expects from you? You come in now as theoretically a sophomore, and those past years didn't really count, so you have 3 years left at Iowa State. What does he expect from you? Like, what does he want you to bring to the program?
I would say he expects me to work hard every day. He expects me to bring my all, every possession, every day, every time, all of it, and that's perfect for me because that's just the sort of person I am, and that's just the sort of player I have become. Just somebody who gives my all anytime I step in the court. More specifically, translating that to defense and offense, he wants me to be a complete disruptor defensively. And offensively, he wants me to do the same thing, get out in transition and just be full of energy and really just sustain that sort of energy for long periods of time and be that person that Iowa State can rely on.
Some characteristics about you that people have talked about, or just kind of watching your film too, is you have a high motor, you're very physical, and you bring a lot of energy whenever you're on the court. Take us through those aspects of you and really how you plan to implement that into Iowa State.
For sure. I feel like the Big 12 as a conference is a very up-tempo, fast-paced offense and defense. And that's just the type of basketball that I play. So bringing that to Iowa State is just going to adhere to the rest of the Big 12's motor. And having somebody like me is going to be great just because I literally fit what they want to do.
Big 12 is known as a conference that typically is kind of a lot more known towards guards play to a degree, but they always have that dominant big man at the same time. And you look at some of the names, I'm not sure who's all going to be exactly well, the transfer thing is going crazy right now, but we know guys in the past. You got Kansas City has a guy like McCormick, Udoka Azubuike, Baylor has all their big men they always are bringing out. Oklahoma State has their guys. How excited are you to be able to compete against those type of centers?
Absolutely stoked. I honestly feel like I can guard anybody in college. It, so just none of that sort of stuff scares me for real. I'm excited to play against those people. At the end of the day, it's just basketball. Everybody's got to make the ball go in the hoop. So
When you look at all the teams in the Big 12, who are you most excited to go up against?
ooh, I would definitely say, shoot, definitely Baylor. I mean, they won last year. It's always nice to play against the best teams and give the best teams your best.
No doubt, man. Well, a few more things before I let you go. One of which is discussing a legacy, because I know that's something that all guys ultimately want to build up for themselves. So when you are done playing basketball someday down the road, what do you ultimately want to be remembered for what you achieved both on and off the court?
I would say definitely more so my achievements off the court. I definitely want to make sure that I maintain myself as a conscious individual who puts people in front of himself when he thinks. My philosophy is just living by the golden rule. Make sure that you think about others before yourself and treat everybody how you want to be treated. So that sort of philosophy is more shown outside of the court, and that's what I want to be remembered for. It's just being a good person.
Absolutely, man. My final thing for you, give the 3 biggest goals you have set for your Iowa State career.
Three biggest goals I'd say is, for one, I definitely want to bring it out of the deficit it's had the last few years. For two, I definitely want to become that sort of star player for Iowa State, the person, that starter, that big man that they need to have on the court to win games. And then three, I definitely just want to embrace the community. I've had great responses from Iowa State fans and Cyclone Nation, and I just want to be a part of that community and just embrace them.
Absolutely, man. Congratulations once again on the move. I look forward to seeing what Guy got next for you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time.
Of course, man. You're all welcome on, man. God bless.
You as well.